Welcome back to the Memory Jogger podcast with Jason and Wyatt. This is Jason and he is Wyatt.
That is what I'm called, at least during the day. At night, it could be something else, like sleepwalking. At least at
You
this
have an alter
point in
ego
time,
then.
I'll call it an alter. I don't know why. I don't think it's really an ego of any type.
Gotcha. Well, we appreciate everyone joining us for episode 4 of the podcast as we attempt to jog our memories and run down a few childhood dreams. And we, again, hope our conversation will help to stir up a few memories of your own as you listen. Well, the last episode we discussed about this unique opportunity we have to collaborate with a few of our fellow podcasters and bloggers, specifically about the 80s, as we talk about Christmas. So this ought to be a fun show and a unique way to essentially talk about our Christmas memories as we specifically talk about the gifts we received.
Sorry, I thought you actually went dead. It looked like you were.
No, I had to scroll up there, but well, if you want to jump in there.
Sorry, where were you? I was actually still doing my notes.
I was just throwing it back over to you for that initial little thing once I announced the topic, and I just said talking about our Christmas gifts. If you had any thoughts there.
Yeah, I know plenty of us. Obviously, Christmas is a thrill for all of us, and when we were kids, I'm sure that some of us can recall getting that, I'll call it that funky clothes, whether it was homemade or kind of like the Ralphie outfit. But
Right.
there are times where we got those cool toys and we couldn't believe that we got them, or the actual, hey, I actually got what I wanted. Sometimes
Right.
they struck it right. It's like, hey, mom and dad were actually paying attention to watching Mask. I gotta try that one at least. But
they actually saw the earmarked page in the Sears Wish book.
Oh,
and ordered it.
well, if it was the toy section, you could pretty much bet it was all earmarked. At least most of it for me.
Yeah. Well, this ought to be a real fun show as we are gonna announce our top 3. We're gonna do a blog post as well, announcing our top 3. But we're gonna go a little bit beyond that in this show, and throw in some more that we remember getting over the holidays, and then talk about maybe some traditions and maybe any presents you wanted that you never got, that kind of a thing. So we're going to go a little bit beyond just the topic of our top 3 Christmas gifts. But before we get into that, I just wanted to give a quick shout to Dave over at the 80s Reboot Overdrive podcast and blog, who sent me the invitation to collaborate on this topic. And I've collaborated many times with what is now known as the Pop Culture League. And this is through coolandcollected.com. But this opportunity I thought was unique in that it's a podcast and blog collaboration, as there's several of us who run podcasts and also have websites and blogs. So, that was really cool. So I just wanted to give a quick shout to Dave for going ahead and sending me that invite. And I hope this was one of many to come, as we've kind of formed a little group on Facebook to share ideas and such. But, he sent over this topic. It was simply put, the top 3 80s Christmas gifts, and it could have been, the ultimate gifts that you wanted as a kid, or it could just be the gifts that you personally received. And that's the way I wanted to spin the topic. And this is pretty much perfect for our show, Wyatt and Memory Jogger, trying to remember those gifts and such. So as we discuss our memories, we will invite you to find the 80s Reboot Overdrive podcast, and then some of the other blogs that'll be participating, like Return to the 80s, Ouija Midget, and also Killer Kit. I don't know how to say that the blog name, but those are all on WordPress, and we'll be posting links to those in the show notes, and also on the actual blog post about our top 3 gifts, so everyone can easily find these other podcasts and blogs and see what their top gifts were, as well as ours. But this is going to be a real fun show, and I guess before we get into the what exactly we remember getting, what kind of traditions did you have growing up around Christmas? Is anything in particular that sticks out on Christmas Day or leading up to Christmas, that kind of a thing, Wyatt?
Well, usually what we did was the night before, we had they were actually cousins to my mom, but they would traditionally mail Christmas gifts to us, kind of like what you and I both sometimes do to the other's kids, and say it's from Aunt so and so or Uncle so and so, and we were allowed to open their presents on Christmas Eve.
Oh, nice.
And it would be just us, 1 or 2 things. It really wasn't anything spectacular, but that was the thrill to kind of quench our thirst for the moment. Probably just to keep us from nagging at mom and dad, going, "Can we open? Can we open? Can we?" Probably
or
what was going
under the tree. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but we do that. Christmas tree decorating usually happened sometime after Thanksgiving. There was no, what I recall, there was no set schedule. I want to say it was at least a couple weeks before. And we had the artificial for many years. I'm sure we had a real one from time to time, but most of the time was the artificial. In fact, I do remember it because it was that green, I call it a dowel rod because it wasn't much wider than that, with, you stick them in type wire mesh,
right,
in limbs, for lack of a better term. You kind of met, it was kind of like the Charlie Brown artificial, and it worked because once we were done, you really couldn't tell that it was all, it was really an artificial. But that was our tradition, really. We'd have family come over periodically. Usually grandparents would stop over. At some point we'd have a dinner. Sometimes one of the aunts would literally walk across the yard to join in. It wasn't often, but I remember her, and that was really, I guess, it. Christmas morning we were always anxious, but not, probably not what you would expect, like seeing on Home Alone, where we're all panicking to, scrambling and knocking kids over to get to the tree and the presents. It wasn't like that. It was more like, hey, it's Christmas. Hey, it's Christmas morning. Oh, okay. Can we open? Come on. Usually we had to wait till after breakfast.
Oh, man.
Yeah, that didn't last I don't think for very long. We had to, go through the order of the day, I'll call it, and then it was a free for all after that. But,
gotcha.
How about on your side of the tracks?
I was trying to remember some of the earlier Christmases. I'm known in certain circles as Mr. Christmas. It's my favorite holiday of the year, and I've developed more traditions, I guess, as I got older, my parents had when I was a kid. We had I remember mainly real trees. Dad would go out and get it, and we would put it in our dining room that was pretty much in front of our sliding glass windows that led out to the backyard, because once Christmas was over, you just opened up the sliding doors and shoved it out the window.
And then it was used for firewood later.
Yeah, there was no deck out there, so it was just kind of a, throwing it off a cliff when we were done with it.
The beautiful times and I guess the beautiful thing about
Yeah.
living out in the boonies like we did, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. But so yeah, I remember mainly real trees. I think at one point we did get an artificial tree, but I know as I got older, I wanted it up quickly, and it's now to the point where we usually get the stuff out around Thanksgiving Day. Sometimes the day after, we'll areas when we'll get our tree up and start decorating and such. And so that we did that. My extended family lived about 2 hours away on my dad's side, so we would, I think, typically do our Christmas, at home, and then drive up there for a Christmas meal with everybody later in the day and exchange presents and so forth. And then at some point, I would head down to Clearfield with my grand, my uncle, and exchange presents and stuff there later during the day. But it was just me. I was an only child, so I was pretty lucky. I was pretty spoiled, as you'll see as we get into the gifts. But yeah, I had such a fun time Christmas. It was one of those where I think they set a time. It's at one point, you can't get up past 7 o'clock, or give us some time to wake up. But
Right.
it was pretty much diving right in. And one unique thing that I'm not sure exactly how it happened, if it was something my parents would turn on, or if it was something that I picked up on. But I was always turning on the TV to WPIX to watch the Yule log, which I assume you know what that is. That's just basically the fireplace for 3 hours with the Christmas music soundtrack. We never had we didn't have a fireplace. We had a wood burning stove in the basement that heated the house. So I never had that experience of huddled around the fire in the living room, that kind of a thing. So we would turn on the TV and get the warm cathode ray glow of the fire that way, and Christmas
Well,
music as you're opening presents.
well, you would get some heat. I mean, the old CRTs put off some heat.
Right. But so that I remember that being a tradition, that being on in the background kind of as we opened presents on Christmas Day. So another one of those WPIX memories that we seem to keep going back to. But I
Right.
remember leading up to Christmas, getting the Sears Wish book and going through that, circling, folding over pages, giving my parents ideas. And I can't remember anything specific, like, I asked for this and I got it. I'm assuming some of the stuff that I did get, I asked for, because my mom was pretty well in tune to what I was into and what I wanted for Christmas. So probably the majority of what I'll be talking about tonight was stuff that I earmarked in there. And that whole leading up to Christmas, I think at one point it was probably later in the 80s when you're past the Santa age, and I remember digging around for presents in my parents' closet. I don't know if you ever did that, but I did do that, and I remember some years finding some things that was put aside for Christmas in the weeks leading up.
Yeah, I was, I guess, too nice. We never really looked all that often. It wasn't until probably about the same time frame, like age time frame, that we kind of got inquisitive. And I remember stumbling onto a VCR, and I'm like, "Oh, that was like the jackpot right there." I'm like, "Awesome! We finally get a VCR." Yeah.
Well, I never ran into anything like that. For some reason, one year I got these NFL mascot trading cards, and they had a whole line. I think they were called the huddles, like NFL huddles or something like that. And they had like a caricature of the NFL mascot, like the Atlanta Falcons. It was a falcon bird, and he had this helmet on. I used to have a bunch of those trading cards, and then there were some other things that they made, little plush things, and there might have been soap on a rope or something. I remember I remember stumbling into that for some reason in my mind when I was, digging around for presents, and that had to have been, mid to late '80s when that stuff was popular. I've seen some of that in some of the old catalogs that I've gone through since then online. I think there's actually a Flickr account that has scans like page by page of several of the Sears Wish books, and
Nice.
the person who runs retromash.com, and his name skips my mind, but he does an advent calendar each year, and he goes through the UK equivalent to the Sears Wish book, which I think is called the Argos catalog, and he posts little items out of those catalogs. Oh man, some great stuff. But little shout out to him. But anyway, let's dive in and give me one of your Christmas gifts from the '80s that you remember opening up. It doesn't, like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be something that you remember asking for, but what's your number one, I guess?
Well, I actually was trying to go over my head what I remember getting, most of which I have up in my shed, so it's easy to just figure out what I got for Christmas. I just got to
Lucky
pick
duck.
one. Yeah, the only one that it came to me actually tonight was I used to drive this. It was a orange, not the General Lee. Sorry, as much as I wanted that. It was a pedal car. If you remember those back in the day, it was kind of like the Power Wheels, but without the battery-powered machine. You actually had pedals in it, and you pedaled it. And I was never able to get that to go the direction I wanted to go. If I wanted to pedal it, it usually went backwards. So I actually did the Fred Flintstone most of my time with that car, and I went through I want to say two sets of the plastic tires. This is the Duke Boy coming into me, and I didn't realize how much of a Duke Boy I was, I guess, or how much I watched him. But I would power slide before I knew it was a power slide down our one street and
Nice.
and cut the corner. I never spilled nothing, never did anything, but I'd power slide it and then go trucking right down to the end of the street, and that was my, I'll call it my corridor. I was allowed to go the full length of our street and up to the alley, which is basically half the street around the corner, but I had to basically come around. And the only reason I was allowed up that side was the neighbor was a cop. He was the sheriff at the time, so it was kind of like, oh, nothing will happen if the sheriff's around there. So, but yeah, that was probably that had to have been my top one because I had that for years. I fake oil changed it. I remember they had to trade out the license plate at some point for one of the cars. Not that we replaced the car, but like PennDOT changed out the actual format for whatever reason. So my dad drilled and screwed on a license plate to the tailgate of the truck. So I actually had a tailgate.
Nice.
Pretty sweet. Yeah. I even had you remember the oil sticker, the oil change stickers that some dealerships would do? They put it on the inside of the door, and it was like a Post-it.
Yeah.
And my
Oh,
dad,
so you
my
you
dad
give me the
would,
old ones?
yeah, I don't know how my dad got them, but he would, grab basically a pad of them, and and he'd do that for his car, and then I'd do it for my little plastic one. I'd just slap it on
Oh,
it.
nice.
Yeah, I had it all rigged up. I'm surprised I remember that much with it. But yeah, it was pretty sweet. How about you? What was your coveted
So,
present?
well, I had to start with something that I still have because a lot of my stuff disappeared, or I guess was donated to a family that we knew that they didn't have much, and this was around the time that I went to college. I was trying to remember if my mom actually asked me if it was okay to give away some of my action figures and toys and such, and I don't remember if that took place, but anyway, I came home one summer and all of my Masters of the Universe and Thundercats figures were gone.
Mm.
And I was like, oh no, not all of them. Yeah, I'll give them a few. But anyway, so I lost some of my stuff. I still have a few things, and some I've actually sold to. I don't know if I've mentioned on this show, but sold to build my mask collection. But
Mhm.
one that I still have that's kind of my pride and joy is the original GI Joe Sky Striker jet, and
Nice.
this was released in, well, it was part. I was doing some little bit of research today. It was part of the second series of toys that Hasbro released around 1983, and they actually kept manufacturing the jet until 1985. So I would guess it's somewhere in there, the 83, 84 range, because I do actually have some pictures from 1985 and that Christmas, and I had already had it by then. So I got that. It was something that I kept close at hand. I don't hardly ever remember taking it like over to friends' houses or even outside very much. I mainly kept it inside, and it's I would love to restore it, the stickers and some of
Right.
the yellowing and that sort of a thing. And I still have all of the missiles and stuff somewhere, and I still have the figure. Um,
Nice.
but yeah, that was one of the earlier Christmas presents that I got, and oh man, I it was just I was into GI Joe. I remember actually watching. Somehow I still remember watching the miniseries of GI Joe: Real American Hero, like those first 5 episodes that they released, which had to have been like 82 or 83. That's one of my earliest memories of GI Joe, watching that. So I was into that. I was into that. I'd watch it in the afternoons as well with Transformers. So getting that jet, man, I was loving it, and that's essentially been one of the things that I made sure I kept and kept away from mom after she started, divvying out my figures. I wanted to keep that thing, and luckily I still have it.
Right.
So so that would be my number one gift that I received in the 80s. What's another one for you?
Well, that was about the time that a lot of the game systems were just starting to birth, most notably the Atari.
Hmm.
However, my dad thought it would be smarter that I'd actually have a computer rather than just a straight game console, so that I could
Hmm.
learn a little bit of computer language and, maybe become the next Bill Gates, which I'm sure he didn't know who he was at the time. Uh, so I got a Texas Instruments TI 99 4A. That's the model number, and I still have that beast to this day. I haven't cracked it out recently, but I did. I did hook it up about, oh, it had to have been about 6, 7 years ago,
Hmm.
um, and I noticed that the uh, the keys aren't responding correctly. Um, this uh, for the listeners, Jason knows of this computer, obviously, but for the listener, Google the TI 99 4A, and there was a joystick that you could use. It was I'll call it a kind of an adaptation to the Atari and maybe like a Coleco style joystick, but it never responded well. At least I didn't have the patience for it. But your other option was that keyboard didn't have arrow keys like we know it today on our modern computers. What it had was uh, up, down, left, and right were E, X, S, and D were the keys. That was all respectively, and your fire button was like I think it was like Q or Enter or that, and then there was a host of other keys that you could use for it. And I say that because you want to go up or down, left to right, however you're playing your games was all on that ESDX.
Right.
And I'd written a short program. It was actually for a Sunday school illustration for some teens, simple bouncy ball thing. And I was able to churn it out. However, every time I push E was the bigger culprit. Every time I pushed E, I get 5 E's. So it was really jacked up. But I have played it. I like it. I still love playing Parsec, which was like I think the standard game that came with it. There was a game I've lost. I cannot find this game, and I loved it. It was called The Tank. And basically you just went around and you literally battled another tank back and forth. There was one called Hunt the Wampus, which was an awesome game.
I remember that.
Car Wars, which was cool. It was kind of like a Pac-Man style. Well, no, that was Jawbreaker, I guess. Jawbreaker 2 is what I had. And
yes, I remember that. Like,
yeah,
you could like brush his teeth or something too.
Well, that was the end. If you got past the stage, you'd hear the and you hear the the corny 8-bit sound effect, and then you see it disappear, and then it move on to the next phase. Car Wars, I guess, is more like a maze style game where you battled against another car, and the idea was the other car was trying to crash you, and you had to avoid it and get all the dots, just like Pac-Man. I was somewhat okay with it. I mean, I was successful like for 3 or 4 rounds, and then that was usually it.
I remember playing football on that.
Yeah, football was awesome. Which, I mean, it was kind of compared to the games of today. I mean, you actually had to sit and wait. You literally, it was really lame. Is the best way to put it, because you had to, especially if you play with a friend, Jason, you'd play with someone. You had to like have people turn away or hide what your play was,
right?
Because it was plain as day. So if you wanted to like blitz, well, you know that the team is gonna blitz, so you run a different, offensive or whatever. So it was just back and forth, and it was sometimes it looked like it was jamming up because you see the characters, which were just helmets, stand there. Yeah. And you're like, is it playing? Did it jam up? And then eventually you'd see the ball go finally. It was just it would take.
Yeah.
It probably took about as long as a regular football game to play the dang game.
Well, I would liken it to the that old school
Commodore
football.
Oh, sorry.
No, the old school football game where you had the players and it vibrated the field and it moved around and stuff. I think our mutual friend Leaf had it. But you didn't control any of the players. It was just essentially plugging in the plays and watching the little helmets move on the screen.
Right.
It was so basic, but we still played it a lot.
Oh yeah, and they, I still love it to this day. They still have on Android. There's actually a TI Texas Instruments Droid.
Oh, really?
It's TI. I think it's called TI Droid or something. Droid TI or something like that. I have it on my other Android. And I play it from time to time. It has a lot of games. It doesn't have Hunt the Wampus, which I feel cheated. But
does it have Alpiner?
Yes, it does, and it has I still have that game too. But it like help. What was the other one?
That one was fun. I remember playing that one a lot.
That was the game that you and I both say the line from time to time. It goes, game over. Press redo or back.
Or back.
Yeah.
That was like you're climbing up a mountain and you got to avoid animals and falling rocks and even like a skunk, right?
Yes, a skunk. We used to joke and say it wasn't a skunk. It was like a dog pooping on you because that's what it looked like. But There was a mountain lion. There's a
That was a crazy
bear.
game.
There's a campfire. Yeah, I thought. Yeah, that's actually loaded on that droid. It's free too, so just go look for it. You can still program it too if you wanted to sit there and.
I might have to. That was your computer and whatever we were using in, well, I guess it would have been about 5th grade. So what is that? 11 years old. That would have been about 87.
Yeah.
When I took that computer class at school. But between that and your computer was my first introduction, to computing, and yours. It was still to me more of an Atari because you could play the games on it and stuff. But I'm sure you did a lot more than that.
I did some programming. I still have, in fact, I still have the book, and I've done programming with it back in the day. But they were so long, and it never saved until years later. I was able to pick up. It's so hilarious what technology was like, but the way to save was you either spent, I don't know how much money it was an exorbitant amount to get the expansion, the disk drive expansion kit, which then you had the 5 1/4 floppy, or you saved yourself a few bucks and bought, which I thought was hilarious once I got it. It was a cassette player, the old push button single speaker. You see them on all 80s shows. I swear you do. But it was
that flipped up and put in. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
So you had that was your data. And the only thing that was different that I could see was that it actually had a remote control hookup, like a phone jack, headphone jack, rather. And you'd hear it when you'd save the data to it. You literally press record, and you'd say, I think it was save data or save to cassette or whatever. And you hear this. It was like the dial-up modem, but on huge amounts of steroids, because it would just scream and scream and scream and scream until it was done. So that's all you hear is it would just go and go and go. And I stumbled on a cassette again about that same time frame. I stumbled on a cassette that had something on it. That's that data stream. I was so tempted to hook it up, but I never got around to it. But yeah, that was, out of all the toys I've had, I think that was one of my most, that and that pedal car is probably my most revered, loved gifts. What about you? What was your number 2?
My number 2, I would have got in 1985 because I have the pictures. I actually, in 1985, I got a GoBots camera. It was basically just your typical, what were those cartridges? I want to say 110, but I don't know if that's correct. But they were like
110s.
The two ends you plugged in, and it had the tower flash that had like, I don't know, 6 or 8 flashes on it. So I took pictures of everything I got for that on the Christmas of 1985. And I used that camera for years. I mean, like probably a good 5 or 6 years. It took great pictures, and it was, it just had a GoBot sticker on the side, and it eventually fell off. And I think it was actually my gram that bought that for me. Because I would show her the pictures, and she'd be like, "Wow, that's a pretty good camera," other than having a Leader 1 on the side. Anyway, so I remember taking a picture of this, and I'm going to post it in the blog post for this show. But it was a die-cast Voltron, and I still have it. It was made by Matchbox. Came out in '84, and I was trying to remember today. I was doing a little bit of research to see if it had some accessories like the blazing sword, and I was pretty sure it did. But that sadly
it did come with it.
It did not make it, because I still have it, and it's one of my most revered. Just my 1B. I always say that my 1B under the Sky Striker is that diecast Voltron, and it's pretty much survived. I'm missing one ear off the Yellow Lion, but everything else is pretty much functional. The blue and the Yellow Lion, the ears came out, and it had like guns on the inside of the ears. And then the blue line, the head kind of lifted up a little bit. It's a gun if you wanted to. But still have it. It's still in pretty good condition. And I know they go for some pretty good money on eBay if I were ever to sell it, but I don't think I ever will. Unless somebody trades me something really good for it.
Like a new car.
Yeah.
Hey, there you go. The new DeLorean that's coming out. Perfect trade right there.
Down payment, maybe. Yeah. So I had that. Again, I kept that thing pretty much under lock and key from anyone. If it was getting played with, it was getting played with in the house. I wasn't taking that over to friends or anything.
Right.
I kept that thing in hand a lot throughout that year, and oh man, it's just so great. It's heavy too, man. You could knock somebody out with it if you got mad. But you see, there's was several versions of Voltron back in the day. They went plastic, and there's some that are really simplified, but this one had the working legs and all the bells and whistles you'd want on a Voltron. It was basically what was the Transformer, the 5 Devastator. It was basically a Devastator Transformer, if you've seen it or the era. But man, that thing was great. And I took a picture of it sitting. I stood it up on the coffee table and took a picture of it. So I'll post that on the website. But yeah, that's definitely my number 2, right behind the Sky Striker. So let's go on to your number 3.
Number 3. That's what I actually had to think quite a bit on, because I used to love whenever my parents would give me like Legos. I was a Lego fiend. But going through my head, I think the higher one out of all the stuff I've had is probably my Optimus Prime, the original. I still have him. He's pretty well stood the test of times. The only thing that I still have the gun, but I don't have it, the fists. But he's still pretty well. He's pretty well worn. I know I drove the heck out of him. But yeah, I still have him. I know I listed out a lot of Transformers I still have.
Right.
I think in our meet the hosts episode of Memory Jogger. But yeah, that's out of all of them. I think I still have that. Yeah. Okay. I have a couple other things, but I think that's probably the top third out of all of them. How about you? What was your number 3?
My number 3. I was into several cartoons, and I had a mixed bag in my toy box. I had a few figures from Masters of the Universe. I had a few from Thundercats. I had a few G.I. Joes, and then I had like one big thing, or maybe 1 or 2 vehicles in G.I. Joe's case. But I remember getting, it would have probably been like 86 or 87. I actually got the electronic version of the Thundercats layer, which was originally released in 86 by LJN. And this was a very unique castle, a play set. I remember actually I had Castle Grayskull, and as much as that was fun and you had the trap doors and stuff, this was like 10 steps beyond that, because you had some like laser light action going on. It was like a battle. It came with one of the mutants vehicles, and you could stick a guy on there, and then it had these like little shields or something that was on the vehicle. And then you had the Cat Slayer, the big cat that's looking down on you. In his mouth, there was a laser, like light beam, and there was one on this mutant vehicle, and you could shoot at each other. If you hit the vehicle, then these little shields or something popped off, and essentially that was I got you. And then if the vehicle hit you, and there was like a little, it might have been the symbol or something below, or right above the door, right below the cat's head. If you hit that, then the doors opened to the lair, and your guys could rush inside and storm the castle. And then it had where the paws come out. There was a couple compartments there, and I remember it had like a trap door or something on the inside as well. I think right after you walked inside. But man, this thing was glorious, and I had. I must have had maybe 2 or 3 figures. I remember having Lino. I remember having the Monkeyan guy as one of the bad guys, and I had Panthro. So I know I had at least those 3, and my buddy Tim would come down. I remember playing with that in our dining room, like shortly after Christmas. It must have been actually finally getting to play, a battle with the thing with one of my friends. That really kind of stuck out in my memory. But man, I was spoiled.
Yeah, really.
Because I think that might have been one of the casualties too that my mom gave away with those figures. She also gave away that castle, and man, I wish I still had it to this day. But it was great. It was really great. And I was big into Masters Universe, and obviously Mask and Boulder Hill. Put that above either of those two.
Really?
Yeah, don't tell my my Mask friends, but yeah, that was
I think we might lose some of our fans.
Man, that was just a great play set. Really great.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I remember seeing the commercials for it, but yeah, I don't remember seeing that in your collection. But I guess I'm gonna hop down a bunny trail just for a short bit.
Sure.
How cool was it when we went to RetroCon in 2015 when we got to meet the guy that voiced Lino?
Larry Kinney. Yeah. That was really cool.
Yeah. I mean, I just now think about it because, you said you had Lino the figure. So I'm like, man,
right.
that had to have been just like, dude, I get to meet him, just like we felt the same way with meeting Doug Stone. Just like, oh, this is so surreal. We get to meet these voices.
Yeah, and I wish I had gotten something signed by him. That
same here. I kick myself sometimes.
I was so focused, and actually being on a panel was just mind blowing to us, and to actually sit next to Doug Stone. I mean, that was just really cool. So we didn't.
Right.
At least I wasn't focusing on. Okay, well, I got to find something Thundercats to get him to sign, and John Machida Jr. was there, the Micro Machines man, and I had to scour the tables there to find a Micro Machine set to get him to sign, that kind of a thing. But yeah, it was really cool to meet him. I was big into Thundercats back in the day. I haven't gone back and really collected much beyond. I actually gotten some of the comics. They ran for. I think pretty good. Maybe 30, 40 issues they ran back in the day, like in the mid 80s. And I think it was Marvel. I'm going to say it was Marvel. Or, no. Marvel or maybe a Star comic. I can't remember. Anyway, I've gone back and gotten a few of those because it was just so rich and vivid, and that whole Third Earth with all the different creatures and everything that they would come upon on the show. Made it one of my favorites. So
right,
yeah, getting that Cat Slater was really cool. So, well, beyond our top 3 there, that'll finish that out, and you can see those on the sites. But let's go a little bit beyond that. What else do you remember getting for Christmas?
Well, if we list them all, I think we'll be doing this for the next couple days. But
well, I've got just a couple more, so let's maybe throw out a couple more.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Just a couple, and we should be good. Going through the list in my head, and what I still have in my toy boxes up in the shed. I would have to say my next favorite um, was probably my Nintendo NES. I know I got it kind of late in the game. I probably did receive it around 89.
Hmm.
I want to say is when I actually got it, maybe 90.
Wow.
But
That's about the time I got mine, and I got it secondhand, so I never got one brand new.
well,
When did it come out? 85, I want to say, somewhere around in there.
85, maybe 86, but yeah, it was in that mid
Several
80s
years after.
era. But yeah, I remember getting it, and of course, you get Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt the combo. I
Hmm.
don't know if she bought anything. My mom bought anything else for that at that time. I know eventually I got. We went to. Oh man, I'm trying to think of that game. Get that the Trading Post down in Clearfield.
Oh yeah. Right next to the Ritz Theater.
Right. And I remember buying a few games from them because of, well, it was cheaper. And
It was you could. I remember this now because I was there often, and I remember actually like riding my bike down there. But you could trade a game in for $1. So anything you had in the case, you could bring one in if you were done playing with it or whatever. You just traded in for $1. And if you had the manual that went with the game, you could trade one in. If there was one that didn't have the manual, you could get it basically for free. Because
nice.
he was getting if you're getting the manual, I think maybe he charged $2 or something. It was a little bit more, but oh yeah, I mean that place was great because he had a selection of NES and Sega Genesis at the time, and that was about the time that I don't know if I bought it from him, the NES that I had, but I got one secondhand somewhere, and I had both systems, so I would go back and forth between the
Right.
NES and the Sega Genesis
Right. But
at
I
the
remember
time.
going there to buy, that's how I landed my Airwolf cartridge.
Oh,
And
nice.
there was one other one. It wasn't very often I got stuff from there. I want to say I only got like 3 or 4 games from them. Arch Rivals was one of them.
Hmm.
Oh, I want to say, I think Sky Shark was actually a bought like another, like a Christmas present or birthday present later on.
Hmm.
There was one other one, and it's not Knight Rider. I don't know how I even picked that one up, to be honest. Um, but anyway, I picked a couple up from there. I don't know where I got. Like I said, I don't remember where I got the rest of them. I imagine it was must have been birthday presents or something.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, that was probably my number four. I know that, like I said, I have a host of other things I could probably list, but that was probably the one I had, and I remember ruining it. I'll call it. Um, Me and my
Oh yeah.
yeah. What I mean by ruining it, it's still. I think it's still functional. I haven't dragged it out for a while. Um, Being in electronics school, they said that you can clean the case of your like VCR and stuff and make them a little bit cleaner by using rubbing
Hmm.
alcohol. So I did that, and doing that, I rubbed off the red ink that says Nintendo NES on the freaking front of the door. So yeah, it's probably one of the few nameless NESs, but it is a true NES. I just wiped it clean. So
Mine got to the point where I had to rip the cover off because the game wouldn't go down when you stuck it in. And I would try to fiddle with it and stuff. And so I had to essentially rip the cover off to get the thing to stay down. It hit it at the right spot. So mine didn't have a
that's
cover
weird.
for the longest time.
What was your number
Yeah,
four? I guess.
well, along those lines, it would have been probably around 86 or 87 that I got I guess it would have been my second console because I had an Atari 2600. I'm not sure if that was a Christmas present. I'm guessing it would be. And I got that I think fairly early, but I got the Sega Master System
Yes.
6 or 87. And I specifically remember going to, I think it was Montgomery Ward. And I was trying to remember if it was at, or maybe it was Hills. It could have been Hills in State College. It was one of those, either Montgomery Ward and Du Bois or Hills in State College I went to, and they had both of them set up. They had the NES and the Sega Master System set up side by side. And for the most part, people were it was kind of like being at an arcade, but you're at this department store and there's a line of kids in the aisle just watching and waiting for that kid's parents to say, all right, Timmy, it's time to come home, time to check out, and had to pass the controller on to the next kid. I remember doing that, and like nobody was playing the Master System. It was on Nintendo. Somebody would pick it up and put it down, but I got that, and I think it was because it had that 3D glasses system. They called it the Segascope glasses, and I got that when I got my Master System, and it came with a like a light gun, just basically like the zapper for the NES, and I think that's probably why I chose that over the Nintendo. And I had that for years in my room. Mainly, well, the games that came with it were Zaxxon 3D. Remember Zaxxon? That was kind of that almost diagonal scrolling game where you could go up and down, and that was a 3D game. And then there was also one that was called Missile Defense, and these missiles would kind of shoot at you, and I think you used the light gun for that. But it wasn't too long after that. I don't know, maybe I want to say maybe it was a few months that the way the glasses worked, it was there was something in each lens, and that made the 3D effect, and one of the lenses went out. So I was down to like 1.5D trying to play these games, and I was like, oh man. And I can't remember if we tried to take it back or exchange it or something, but the 3D part of that went out. So I really never picked up those 3D games again. And I was mainly I had all of the sports games. They're all called Great. It was like Great Basketball, Great Baseball, Great Football. I remember playing those a lot. I remember playing, there was a game for Alf that was just super hard. It was so hard, dude. And it was one of those games where you had, all right, you got to go down in this cave and get this piece to your spaceship, but there's bats down there, and how you defeat the bats is you have to go back up and go to the kitchen of your house and get this big salami to beat these bats off with. And then you have to go here and get this other part of the ship, and then once you assemble the ship, then there was this whole it was really difficult where you're in space and you're trying to avoid stuff and you're trying to get back to Melmac, and I don't know. I don't remember ever completing it, but I loved Alf, so it was just fun to walk around as Alf. Anyway, so I remember getting that. It's around 86 or 87, and that was before I ever had an NES. It was probably early 90s before I got my NES, and then eventually got the Sega Genesis too. So I was living the high life there for a while, but it was unique because everybody had an NES, and I would go over to my friends' houses like you and several others who had the NES. I remember going to Leaf's birthday party when he got Super Mario Brothers 3. Do you remember that?
I don't know if it was his party, but I remember playing it, and man, that was just, to us, that was awesome to be able to play 3 and see Mario flying, and oh man.
Yeah, and he was, when it's your birthday, you get to direct the party. But I remember just watching it. I don't remember ever playing it, but I remember watching it at his party.
Yeah,
and all the different things you could do with it, and oh man, that was crazy. But you know, all my friends had the Nintendo, and I was the only one that had the Sega Master System. So I thought that was kind of fun that I had something different when they came over.
I don't remember your
So
Master System. I remember the Genesis because I used to
mhm.
love playing like Outrun and Sonic. So
Yeah, I kind of retired it after I got the Nintendo. Once I had the Nintendo and Genesis set up, I didn't go back to it too much. Um, I don't know if it was just uh, it had kind of fizzled out and it didn't sell as well as the NES. So I don't know if when the point was where they quit making games and so forth. But um, I essentially retired it at one point and went on to the other stuff, and especially since we had that trading post there to get new stuff. That was real easy to get new games and
oh yeah.
on those systems. So, well, you got one more for me?
Yeah, and this one was kind of hard to think about because me and my Dukes of Hazzard, I thought I'd actually pick this out, but then I remembered uh, my dad got me an Airwolf. It was a gas-powered Airwolf,
Oh wow!
but it wasn't remote control, which kind of felt pointless. And we never flew it. It has never seen the air. I was so afraid that because the whole idea of this stupid thing was, you fill it with this little can of oil or gas, excuse me,
Mm-hmm.
rather, and you had this little battery, and you basically got it cranked up,
Uh-huh.
and then it would, I usually held it by the Airwolf wings until it ran out of gas. So if I let it outside, hanging by the string, basically to keep it somewhat anchored to me, what happens when the string cuts out? That was my fear. And where I lived, especially around my dad's, I lived in a bunch of trees, so
Oh
it
yeah.
probably would be taken out. So I remember firing that thing up, usually in his basement, and you'd hear it me, and that was it. But I loved it because I actually had an Airwolf in my hand. I actually have two Airwolves. Come to think of it, I have uh, a regular toy Airwolf that you
Right.
could play with and do whatever else, just play along with Mask or whomever. And.
Uh-huh. I think I remember that.
Actually, if any of you are Facebook friends, Jason, I actually had that up for a while as my background or profile picture because you see Adam, my son, my older son, out playing with mostly Mask, but you see Airwolf next to I think Switchblade, and so yeah.
Nice.
What was your
Cool.
probably one of your last coveted items?
Well, I was just going through a mental inventory of what I sold on eBay um to fund my mask collection. I remember I had the GoBots base, which was like this. It was almost like one of those uh, Imperial walkers, the AT-ATs from Star Wars,
Oh yeah.
when it would be in that position, but it would basically stand up, and you had this like 2 or 3 level base and a elevator on the inside, in this big robot face that you could push a button and it buzzed. I ended up selling that on eBay and several of my GoBots. I had it was the Rambo helicopter.
Oh yeah, I
Uh,
remember that beast.
and the Rambo figures were tall. It seemed like they were taller, maybe about as tall as the Thundercats, because the Thundercats, I want to say, were just a little bit bigger than like Masters of the Universe.
Right.
But I was big into Rambo for a while. Not that I ever remember watching the movies or anything, but there's a whole toy line. There was a cartoon, Rambo cartoon. I don't remember watching it, but I had several of the figures. And then that helicopter was like trigger controlled, so it had like the wings like Airwolf, and there's these huge missiles that hung off the side, and you could pull the trigger to turn the blades on top. And I also remember having a Rambo M60, and Oh, this thing was cool because we played a lot in the woods and a lot of Army and GI Joe, back in the woods and building our own forts and stuff. This thing, it was two parts. You could pull off the nose of this gun, and it would essentially be your M16, and it made that sound when you pulled the trigger. And then on the end there, where the piece that you could take off was a dart gun, one of those like fluorescent orange darts you used to get back in the day. And you could, it had a bipod that you could flip down and like snipe people with on the ground with it. So, oh yeah, I was huge into Rambo for a while. But I guess the one that I'll put out there that I specifically remember getting for Christmas was later in the 80s when the starting lineup figures were big. Baseball, basketball, football figures that were basically action figures, but they were on like little stands. And I think they weren't removable essentially. So you just stood them up and then you could move their arms into different positions. And I was still am a huge Los Angeles Lakers fan. So one Christmas I got Magic Johnson and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I still have those as well. Held on to those for several years. And they came with a trading card in the package. And I still have the cards too in one of my books of trading cards out there. But those were, for the longest time, if anybody was into trading cards and sports and stuff as kid in the mid to late 80s, those starting lineup figures were pretty sought after. And they had usually 2 or 3 players from every team. So there was a lot to collect if you wanted to, go out there and collect them all. But that was probably one of the later gifts I remember getting in the 80s, probably around 88 when I got those. I did look them up online, and I think the specific ones that I have were released in 88. So that was those were really fun. But what presents, if any, maybe you wanted that you remember maybe circling in the yearbook, in the wish book, that maybe you never got?
Oh, there's probably a slew of them that I circled. I know a lot of it was mask related. I only ever got the Condor. I'm trying to think what other things. The only thing that came up to my mind is I was a big, big Voltron fan. Still am, I guess.
Mm.
And the one thing I never got was what you had.
The diecast Voltron.
The diecast Voltron, and I wanted one of those for years. And then haphazardly enough, I think it was around 2000, maybe just a tad later. I was walking through, trying to think where I was in that era. I had to have been out in, trying to think where I was. I think I was actually still out in Illinois. Anyway, I was walking through a Kmart, and I literally just, by coincidence, passing by the clearance aisle, and lo and behold, is the plastic remake that they made when Voltron.
Wow.
When Voltron came back out, Voltron came back out in around that era as Voltron 3D, the third dimension. I liked it because it brought back a few of the original cast members, voice cast members. Anyway, and I had the plastic one. I'm like, dude, I'm picking this up because it was like 20, 25 bucks. No, it was 10.
Oh, wow.
It was 10 for the plastic. And then they actually had a stealth Voltron that was part of that show, which I didn't even know about until I rewatched it here on Netflix here some time ago. And there was a stealth. They basically literally entered a third dimension, and somehow the lions would change into this black stealth type Voltron lion, except that they had one little swipe of the color. So like Red Lion had a red swipe and so forth. But they had that toy set there too. But I'm like, okay, never heard of this. I don't need it. But nonetheless, like I said, I picked up the my plastic guy for $10, and I'm just about as happy. So I'm not out anything. But yeah,
Cool.
as a kid, I was really wanting one of those Voltras like you had. How about you? What was your um, probably one of your favorites, or one of the things that you wanted as a kid?
Well, uh, I remember having a small. You remember the slot racing cars
Oh yeah.
and tracks that they had back in the day, and there were several that they had that were licensed, themed slot racing tracks. There was a Thundercats track I remember, and I think Transformers had one. GI Joe had a couple. Some with like trains and stuff. I remember. And the ones that I always circled were those Tyco ones that went up on the walls and stuff. I think they called them like
Oh yeah.
cliffhangers or something.
Yep.
And there were some they at one point they went to like glow in the dark. I think they called it night glow. And you could turn off the lights and race. Oh, I was always circling those in the wish book and never got one. I don't know what it was about those slot racing tracks, but they just look cool in the commercials, and it was by Tyco, of course. You know, remember those commercials? That announcer
I
that
do.
just, oh man, he made it sound like they were the greatest thing in the world. And I remember in the wish book, there was always like maybe a couple smaller tracks that were, $20-30, and then there was always one that was like engulfing several kids as they were using it. That was just huge, and it was $100 or more. And I remember really wanting something like that, but I had no idea where we would set it up. We did have a basement that was unfinished, but I don't know. I just like those slot racers and all the different things, all the different licensed ones, but never got one as a kid. So I guess I'll put that as my number one that I never got. So, well, if else you want to add to the list or to
Well,
the list you didn't get.
no, I know quite a bit of what I have. Maybe we'll save it for another episode where we basically open up our toy boxes and kind of run down what we've
Yeah.
done or have or did have at one point. Like I said, I have most of mine. I just got to break it out of the shed. If I do that, I know I'm going to have my buddy with me though.
Right.
And he'll be transforming everybody. He's already itching here. He's I had him up there looking at Prowl. Is that the Lamborghini?
Yeah.
And
I think we talked about that before.
yeah, and he's already itching. He goes, Can we go up in your shed and play with the police car? I'm like, oh no, yes, no, yes. And my wife actually is trying to say, you as many kids as we want, and we already have, baby number two. There's always going to be the younger kid around. So it's either never going to get opened and never played with, or you just roll the dice and see what happens. I'm like, oh man, I don't really want to roll the dice. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But it is a toy, and I got to try to think of it like that. As meant to play with. I wanted to give it to him anyway.
They are worth money now, though. So that's the other thing to consider.
That's what I'm trying to keep in my mind. I'm like, so I could just sell them and make a fortune, or at least pay off something. So, yeah, it's hard for me to do that.
Right, and that would be fun because I do have some pretty vivid memories of all the individual figures and playsets and vehicles. I actually named a lot of them, in this podcast. Because I did have a lot, and so that would be fun to do in a future episode. And I this is one aspect of Christmas because I did want to go into maybe some of the Christmas specials and stuff that we remember over the years, movies. So maybe we'll do that. We'll save that for next Christmas.
I think so.
And dive into something like that because I don't think we're gonna have time to do another podcast before Christmas gets here this year. Unless we want to do like Christmas in July or something, but that might be a little weird.
Yeah.
But okay, well, that I guess we'll end the Christmas, our top Christmas gifts discussion there, and I'll put it back in your court as to what are you thinking for episode number 5 as far as the topic goes.
Well, I think we were discussing this actually the other day. I'm trying to think what I think it was the VHS. What we put on our VHSs, like what do we have like the most of on one? Whether it, for me, it probably was like Dukes. For you, it was oh, you just said it too. You fill a VCR or
Right.
basically a VHS full of what were they mostly of, and then maybe go, if there's time, to go through some of the I'll call it the haphazard recordings that you still would watch. I know for me it was kind of like, maybe I'd see a couple MTV videos, and then it might be an episode of Knight Rider, then it might be an episode of Saved by the Bell, or whatever haphazard recordings. So I think that's what we'll do, is we'll call it the VHS episode.
Okay. And yeah, I do have a box, maybe 2 boxes in my garage of old VHS tapes. I still, believe it or not, we somewhat upgraded our TV just a few weeks ago, and we've got this huge 50-inch now, and I still have my VCR hooked up to it. Because there's some things I just have not converted over, like the Charlie Brown specials and some of our Christmas movies and such are still on VHS. So I still have a pretty good collection of VHS tapes. And I know I've got a box, at least one box out there that's just the blank tapes that I recorded stuff on. So I'm going to have to dig that out and see if maybe you can dig out some of yours as we go through the episode, and see if we can pull out some random ones and see what was written on there, or I don't know if we've got time to pop it in or something, just to see some that are, maybe they're not marked. I typically marked mine. I don't know about you, but when I was recording something, I would write on the outside. If I recorded over, I'd scratch it out and write whatever else is on there, that kind of a thing. But that would be fun to dip into.
Yeah, I know. I marked every single one of them. I would try to mark them unless it was a full episode.
Mm-hmm.
I would typically write kind of like I will call it in a column order. Be up down as per episode. Up down up down up down across the little tiny face, the narrow face you would see on display. But yeah, I think it would be a fun episode. I never thought I'd see the day I do it, but I did purge a lot of my VHSs, mainly because I have them on DVD. So it was kind of like, why have the redundancy when I have the better quality on DVD? Yeah. So I did do some purging. I still have a few. I know I still have a few. My intention is to actually watch them to see what's really on them, because I know I have a few that have no labels, so I have no idea what's on them. I want to at least
that'll be our homework then. Let's see if we can figure out what's on some of these tapes. And I will, on occasion, if I know it's something rare or something maybe that hasn't been converted over to DVD, I'll still pick up a VHS tape in the thrift shops or the little antique mall I go to here on occasion. So I know some of them are valuable because, like I said, if they're not converted over yet, that's really the only way you can consume these, unless somebody's graciously put one out there on YouTube to watch, and the rights are not challenged or anything, and it's available for viewing. But I think it'd be fun, a really fun episode to talk about. So cool. Okay, we'll we'll do that on the next episode. And if everybody will go over to the notes for this podcast and also on Rediscover the 80s, we'll post this. I think we're posting all of this on December the 15th. So go over there and make sure you click over to the other sites and podcasts that are participating in this top Christmas gifts collaboration. And if you'll go do that and check out those and follow them on their, we're trying to basically expand this as a community and connect with maybe some 80s sites that you don't know that are out there. So
Right.
So go track those down, and then if you'll do one other thing for us, which is leave your comments on some of the Christmas gifts you remember getting in the 80s. And again, maybe you're not exactly the same ages as we were, maybe you're a little bit older or something, but I'm sure you can still remember some gifts that you got, electronics and that kind of a thing. If you're a little bit older, you get that cassette player radio in your car or something, but go ahead and do that on our show notes to episode 4 here, and we'll try to read those back. And again, we've kind of did a quick turn on these podcasts, so we didn't get to read back any listener feedback to our Nickelodeon episode, but make sure you go out there and connect with us and check that out if you missed it. And our earlier episodes, as we I don't know, I love this, how we're doing this with the topics, and we're writing down ideas, but just like this VHS thing that kind of came up on a whim. We had it written down in our ideas, but it was nothing that we really planned. Oh, this was going to be episode 5 and we're going to do this for episode 6. I like it this way. I think it's fun.
Yeah, I like the dynamics.
So all right, man, we'll take us on out of here.
All right. Well, as the credits roll by, I'd like to thank all of our listeners for joining us and allowing us into your ears. Again, we invite your memories via the comments on rediscoverthe80s.com, on our social media outlets, which are many. Just ask Jason. And
Yes.
join us again as we go running down Memory Jogger.